And I actually wrote it up and made it available on his behalf for the papers, and people were calling me, and it was an example where as soon as it was reported, he came under attack for no scientific reason, but has not been able to raise money since then to do a follow-up and to actually get it published. They're trying to get after me all the time. There was a profile in me in Reuters last week where I described that I was traveling all around the world and presenting evidence of thousands of sick, sterile, and dead livestock, thousands of toxic and allergic reactions in humans, and damage to virtually every organ and system studied. And of course, they had to balance the report by a pro-GM, mindless person who said, Jeffrey Smith is articulate and strong in his personal beliefs, but he has no scientific background at all. Well, she just ignored the fact that my book has been reviewed by every single page by at least 3 scientists, that there's 1,200 endnotes, and that I worked with more than 30 scientists to produce it. But none the matter.
Well, Genetic Roulette is a textbook.
Yes, and in fact, it's kind of a combination of a textbook and a brochure. And that's because I had to deal with the attention deficit politician and the scientific staff. So I took out every 2-page spread has an executive summary on the left side for someone to quickly read the whole book in just an hour, and detailed cited text on the right for someone to dive into it and then go back to the endnotes. So yes, it has a textbook quality for those that want to dive in, and it has a brochure or a executive summary quality for those that just want to flip through and get the whole picture.
It's incredible. It's probably the prettiest and most well put together book we sell on the online store. Now, I want to take a few calls, and I want to cover other facets, and I appreciate you coming back every few weeks to just continue our education.
Sure.
But the more Frankenfood type stuff, I remember 8-9 years ago getting on air, reading CBS News, AP, Reuters, having the CEO in upstate New York of one of the spider goat facilities where they have the Army guarding it, where the udders are producing the spider web body armor, and then listeners emailing me and people confronting me on the street saying, you're a liar, you can't cross a spider with a goat. There's still a lot of denial, even when this is all admitted. You can go to Hong Kong and buy glow-in-the-dark rhesus monkeys that have been crossed with jellyfish. You tell somebody that, they think you're lying. We're already kind of at a Blade Runner level. You talk about GMO for mass distribution. We have the Asian labs and others that literally just for street sales, like out of Blade Runner, where you're buying clones in the street. They for years have been and just randomly splicing. So this has even gotten down to a boutique level. Where this is all going on, and the scientists are saying that can give rise to super viruses, bacteria, just creating the polio vaccine culture in monkey kidneys, gave millions of people, and that's how admitted cancer, and hundreds of millions the SV40 cancer virus. So what? And that's a 60-year-old, 50-year-old crisis. What about now? Just all the insane stuff that's going on.
Well, yeah, right now we have the ability to mix and match genes from various species and put them together, and we're really babes in the woods there. Every single few months we completely redefine what DNA is all about. There was a study that came out where they took 2 strands of DNA and they put it into a completely clean solution, and they were able to match up with their partners without transferring proteins or molecules between them. So they realized, my God, there's some way that these DNA strands recognize each other as like a field effect, just from being within the presence of similar strands.
They're transmitting, is what more and more scientists think.
And it turns out, I was approaching a scientist years ago. I happened to have lunch with a Monsanto scientist who did supposed safety studies, and I said, well, you're blasting these genes with a gene gun into the DNA, causing damage to the sequences where it hits. Well, what if it hits a part of the sequence where it's a problem? And he says, well, we're learning more and more about which sequences are important. I said, well, that's good. But then I said, what if all of the sequences in the DNA were important? What if there were quantum mechanical or field effects of within the DNA that we don't even understand, and you're blasting new genetic material with a gun in there, sometimes deleting, several genes and rearranging genes, and he didn't answer. He just continued to eat.
Well, we also know that there are a lot of ancient diseases and things that life forms have beaten that the code of that through their immunity is locked up, and so you literally have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, of different diseases, different pathogens that are locked up in that coding.
Here's where this is a very good question, Alex. Now, we talked earlier about the promoter, the on switch, which can randomly turn on genes full bore 24/7 around the clock. There are ancient viruses embedded inside the DNA of human beings and other higher organisms. Most of them are degraded, but some may be fully intact but lack their on switch. What happens if this promoter, this gene, the transgene that gets inserted, ends up near one of these old viruses? And what if that on switch turns it on? We could be flipping on viruses that haven't been in this earth for centuries or millennia because of this random nature of the
Well, that's what all the top scientists I have on say, and then I simplify it and say, folks, all this engineering could give rise to super viruses. You know, that's shorthand. I'm not just saying that.
And there's another way that it can cause other viruses also, and that is in papaya, zucchini, and crookneck squash, the three minor GM ingredients. They're engineered basically to resist a certain virus. And what they do is they put viral genes into the DNA of this papaya, zucchini, and crookneck squash.
And we know viruses mix so they can mutate together.
Exactly. They can not only mutate, but they also create viral proteins. Now, what do viral proteins do? They destroy the defenses of an organism against viruses so that it sort of paves the way for the virus to take hold.
So it opens them up for further infections.
Now, if we eat these genetically engineered crops, we're taking higher levels of these viral proteins into us.
What's some of the other just freakish things that are going on?
Well, they found that when genetically modified corn transfers its pollen into crops in Mexico that are corn, for some reason they end up like monstrosities, absolute monster corn stalks that have multiple ears or weird flowers or 15 feet high. I've seen some pictures of these, and it's just amazing. We also have the way that government scientists were treated when they talked about the health risks of genetically engineered foods. From Richard Burroughs, who is trying to stop the genetically modified bovine growth hormone from being introduced without more testing, to even the FDA's own scientific panel designed to create the policy on GMOs. Practically everything they said was discarded and thrown away in favor of the political appointees who were told to promote biotechnology, including Monsanto's former attorney and later their vice president.
In fact, reading all these different documents, and I'll spend the time to actually go over them, you'll have a government study or even a company study. Their scientists all say, this is bad, this is horrible, this is terrible. Then the lawyers take it, they rewrite it and say it's wonderful, and then source the study saying, because we have these scientists work 5 years on it, never say what the scientists said and kind of plagiarize and lie and say that they support it. I mean, I see that a lot. Is that really common?
Well, in Seeds of Deception, which you have there, it's exactly what happened with the FDA. The FDA wrote about the fact that GMOs could create allergies, toxins, new diseases, and nutritional problems. Then the person in charge of policy, Monsanto's former attorney, later their vice president, took them out and made GMOs safe. Then it was sent to the White House counsel, the lawyer for the White House, and also the Office of Management and Budget, and they complained that it was still showing problems, and they rewrote it again. So as it got further up the political chain, these GM foods became safer and safer. But if you trace it back to the science, it turns out they're inherently unsafe, and now we know they may be responsible for huge amounts of increase of problems in the United States.
Well, scientists are pretty much across the board. It's a very upright, very serious, very focused, and generally moral group. And I almost always find that the scientists say, don't put this on the market, but then the company lies and says, our scientists say it's good.
Yes, I have this interesting quote. When Monsanto wanted to do a scientific study to prove that BT cotton, their GM cotton in India, was successful, instead of getting scientists to do their studies, they hired a market research agency that ended up claiming 4 times the actual reduction in pesticide use, 12 times the actual yield, and 100 times the actual profit. So then you start having one scientific study versus another, and if it's industry-funded studies, well, it's designed to avoid finding problems.
Just amazing. Wesley Smith, stay there. Later in the next